Hi, everybody. I'm Julia, and you are here in the series of job readiness with Cherry on Tech. This is the first time that we are doing this. We finished our second cohort last time in December, and we thought that bringing people and sharing their knowledge, it would be a great space for not just the people who went into the cohort, but for everybody else. But before that, I start. I remember last minute, but I remember. I would like to acknowledge the tradition and central unceded territory of the Turtle Island, on which we are learning, working, and showing today. That's where I am. And I think it's important to acknowledge the land because I moved here as an immigrant and I never heard the traditional names of the territories. Indigenous people were talked about in the past tense, and all the struggles they faced, they were in the past tense as well. So I hope that you do your homework and search about what is land acknowledgement and what indigenous territory you are. For today, I'm excited. We are going to talk about developers and how developers can find a job, and a little bit about Cherry and Tech. We are a volunteer organization. We help and empower underrepresented gender, women, no-binary, and trans people to get into tech by the power of a tech squad. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we have our cohort last year, fall 2023, and they work and they did amazing projects. Let me show you what they work on. So this is a little bit of a summary of our, again, fall 2023 cohort. There were in a total of 6 tech squads, that's 42 participants, 12 product managers, 12 UX designers, and 18 developers. They ended up doing 6 projects, and I will share this here for everybody to check it out. And if you want to know more about how to be part of our next cohort that is starting really soon, next week, we're going to have a roundtable of the participants. They're going to share what they learned, what they like, the roadblocks that they had. So super cool. We are coming with a new cohort soon, so stay tuned for that. And the person who is helping us today, she was one of our Cherry mentors for the developer side. Hi, Yulenda. Nice to have you here today.
Hi, Julia. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, I'm super pumped because I feel like your knowledge is going to help a lot of people. And I will say not just developers, I will say that anyone coming into tech is going to find these tips really useful. So why don't we start telling people who you are? And I'm going to share your, there you go. It's yours.
Great, thank you. I hope you read my blurb in the event that Juliet has shared in LinkedIn and various other platforms. I started tech long time ago now. It feels. I started off uh, with my dual role as assistant office manager and developer. I hired our I Sorry, I forgot to bring this up, but I hired the first Canadian developers for a Japanese company. And then I moved to a digital marketing company where I was the lead in reviewing applications and advising the hiring team who should be interviewed. So with that experience and my personal passion of keeping on top of what's trending and how to be better at being me, being a professional. So with that, this is the developer job hunt from search to interview. So thank you for joining me. So today's job market is tough with the great resignation and massive Mang layoffs. There seems to be an extraordinary amount of people vying for each opening. So I hope my presentation helps you in your search. Before applying, well, your resume and your cover letter. The goal is to make yours stand out among the hundreds of applicants. Bullet points are easy to skim. Start each bullet point with a strong action word like oversaw, managed, administered, instead of responsible for, or orchestrated, structured, systemized, instead of organized. If you're applying for a technical support role, make your bullet points obvious that you have the customer service, troubleshooting, and problem solving experience. But if you're also applying for front-end development roles, you wouldn't want to overemphasize your technical support experience. Instead, you should have a front-end developer resume that demonstrates your development experience. Name the stack that you used, name what you engineered. However, there is crossover from tech support to development, so troubleshooting and problem solving is needed for both roles. Highlight them both. Your cover letter. There are many of those who don't believe a cover letter is useful. When I was reviewing applications, I usually skimmed the resume first for relevant experience, and if they had most of them, I'd move on to the cover letter if there was one. I viewed the cover letter as the opportunity for the applicant to show I'm a real person and I'm interested in this position because, and I'd be great at it because. But a little warning, if you've created a template for yourself and you just copy and paste the company name and in the position, make sure you fill in the template correctly before you send it off. I've received a cover letter applying for a position at a different company, or worse, it still had their placeholder word in there. Unique formatting. Gone are the days of boring, rigid word templates, so be creative and use color. I reviewed the application for a front-end developer role that didn't have the level of experience we needed, but the resume and cover letter was so wonderfully formatted that I convinced the hiring manager to interview them anyways. I hoped they could be easily trained for the role, and if it hadn't been for that unique formatting, I probably would have skimmed over them. Now, use tools like AI. Work smarter, not harder. In the early 2000s, I paid someone to sit with me and ask me pointed questions about my skills and experience. In the end, it was a lot of money for a very ugly, old-fashioned looking resume, but it got me past my own mental block, so it was worth it. However, nowadays, you can just copy paste whole job descriptions into ChatGPT, then paste your resume in, and have ChatGPT rewrite your resume to suit the job description in minutes for free. Use that to get past your own mental block instead of some dude 30 plus years my senior in a tiny office next to a parkade. Other things. LinkedIn seems to be the source of verifying you are who you say you are. So write a profile summary and include a professional headshot. I don't think you should put your entire resume on LinkedIn for privacy reasons, nor should you include any personal information not relevant to your professional identity for the same reasons. Google yourself. Are you okay with the results? If there are any results that don't help your professional identity, prepare answers to explain them if you cannot get the listing removed or at least pushed off the first page of results. Vet the company and position. Do you like the company you're thinking of applying to? Do you like the job description? And don't underestimate your skills and experience such that you would discount a role because you don't have all the required skills listed. Generally speaking, women tend to undervalue their skills and experience, whereas men tend to overvalue. If you like the job and have some of the required skills, then apply. Track your applications. It's a numbers game these days. Create a tracking system to stay on top of your applications. DIY options include a spreadsheet, Airtable, Trello, Todoist, Notion, whatever you're most comfortable with and will be able to keep updated. Here are some sample data points that you want to keep track. Status could be like not ready, ready, applied, rejected, interview scheduled. Contacts of network connections are people you could potentially reach out to who could help you put in a good word. Point of contact could be the email address you sent your application to or the HR person to contact. Write notes to yourself to remind you why this job interested you in the first place. Rate how much you like it on a scale of either on 1 to 10, either in comparison to other jobs or based on your own criteria, such as remote only or in office only, whatever you are looking for in a job. And if you don't want to do your own DIY option, there are tools out there to track your jobs, like Teal or Jibber. So now that your stunning resume has risen to the top of the pile and you've been selected for an interview, it's time to prepare. What you'll need to do. References. Reach out to your references and ask them for their preferred method of contact. Give a brief summary of the role you're interviewing for so they have enough time to think about your skills and experience that apply to the role. Even better, you could send them your applicable skills and experience as a reference. Make it easy for them to give you a glowing reference. Research the company you're interviewing for. Add the information to your tracker. What is their core business? Are there any recent news? Did they go public? Did they have layoffs? If you know who you'll be interviewing with, research them so you can direct some relevant questions at them. And your 4 core stories, common questions, and questions to ask, I'll elaborate on next. 4 core stories. 4 core stories. These 4 stories will answer almost every behavioral-based question you'll be asked. First one. Create those stories and practice them. First one, your most successful project. This success story tells the time you did something really well. The interviewer wants to learn what you consider as success, how you measured it, and what you did to achieve it. Your least successful project. This is your failure story, and it shouldn't be generic like, I always forget to log my dev time. I solved it by setting reminders, and now I don't forget. It needs to describe what the failure was, what the impact was, and how you fixed it. End on a positive note by talking about what you learned from the experience and how it has helped you in your career. Number 3, your most difficult stakeholder. This could be a client, coworker, manager, your home general contractor, or anyone you've had conflict with in a professional setting. The purpose of this story is to tell how you navigate difficult people and resolve conflicts. Do you lose your temper? If so, how do you repair after? And this last story tells the interviewer what makes you really happy in your career. What drives you? You don't want to veer into the personal realm and say, I'm really interested in aerial circus, and one day I hope to teach beginner classes at a resort and maybe perform a couple times a week. Keep it career related. This is all about your professional identity. Here are the 12 common questions. Having these prepared will help ease your nerves during an interview, as you won't have to think on the spot as much. Number 1, tell me about yourself. This is your elevator pitch. Keep it concise and relevant to your professional identity. Like 2 or 3 things about you that you think are interesting and are relevant to this job. Then tell them. Tell them what you would like to do next, and hopefully that aligns with this job. I won't go over every point, but number 11, what is your biggest challenge at work? Don't complain. Focus on discussing a challenge you are actively working on to overcome. This goal, sorry, I skipped over these. Right, so number 3, this is your core story, your 1 and 2, your success and your failure story. And how you handle stress in difficult situations, that's your core story number 3, how you dealt with difficult people. Describing yourself in 1 word is your passion project. That can be answered with part of your core story 4. Your greatest accomplishment, your success story, time you failed, your failure story, and then this one, you don't want to complain, right? You want to talk about what challenge you're working on and how you're actively working to overcome it. The goal is to demonstrate that you are a problem solver who is always looking for ways to improve. And then, do you have any questions for me? That's on the next slide. So this section, do you have any questions to ask? Is your chance to be memorable and to stand out. So have some prepared ahead of time so you aren't scrambling to think on the spot. View this portion as your opportunity to show what a competent and likable person you are. Remember, an interview is a conversation. Stay present and keep the conversation ball rolling, which means you don't have to wait until the end of the interview when they ask, do you have any questions to ask? If there's a good opportunity in the interview to naturally segue into one of your prepared questions, ask it. But as Mike Pedito, a technical recruiter, says, follow up on their answer with a related question or statement that keep the interview conversation centered on why you're a good candidate. And it also gives them a reason to understand why you're asking such a question and not just checking off a box. Here are 6 sneaky work culture questions that I am quoting Advice with Aaron's directly to professionally ask important culture questions. See if you can guess what the underlying question for each of them is. So, number 1 would be asking, do you give bonuses or what? Number 2, are there promotions or am I stuck in this position forever? Number 3, do you pay for gym memberships? What other perks are there? Number 4, do you even like working here? Number 5, is the company political or is it flat and disorganized? And number 6, will it suck to have kids at this company? What if I have familial obligations? Here are some other suggested questions. The key with these is not to just ask a question, then check it off and move on to the next, but to engage the interviewer. And these are the questions you may think of more, and these are just suggestions. You may think of even more relevant questions during the interview that are specific to the interviewer, which would leave a more memorable impact than your prepared ones. Now, my friend, she told me about an interview she had, and she did her research, but she noticed that her interviewers were not paying attention. So rather than acknowledging that, she just ignored it. But she knew in the back of her mind that they were probably busy and stressing about a recent news development or a failure that went public. So had she brought it up, I think it would have impacted her interview a lot better. So just be aware, be present, and notice what your interviewer is doing. And now we're at the interview part. General tips. For an in-person interview, you wouldn't pull out your phone or laptop to have your notes out. So I personally prefer having my notes and questions printed out even for virtual interviews. This way, the interviewer can see that you're looking at your notes and not social media or whatever they may assume. You can also write down your answers for your application tracker later. You will get parched talking, so have some water on hand. I suggest a glass rather than a water bottle because when I helped a friend conduct a mock interview, she drank from her water bottle and that guzzling motion was noticeable, not in a flattering way. So it's just a minor detail. Choose a quiet location with a neutral background. Virtual backgrounds are great in a pinch, but in my opinion, it implies that you're hiding something and can sometimes make you look unflattering on camera. Related is lighting. You want to look your best, so avoid backlighting. I don't think you need ring light or anything fancy. Just test out your location with a friend and have them let you know whether you look good or not. Look at the interviewer. Move their video window to just below your camera so it looks like you can see them. From that same mock interview, my friend was looking away from the camera when she spoke. That, and coupled with her professor voice, made her very unrelatable. Her professor voice is what Ask Vin calls your default voice. It's not engaging and is lacking the 3 most important communication skills needed to communicate effectively. So this is all from Vin Jiang, a great public speaking content creator by the handle of Ask Vin. I've included links to all the references I've used for this presentation at the end, so you can go watch them. So here I'll just go over a little bit of each part. Number 1, vocal engagement. This means varying your rate of speech. My my friend's professor voice was all one speech, all one volume, coupled with not looking at the camera. I quickly found myself zoning out, so vary your rate of speech. And most likely, you'll need to slow down. When people get nervous, we tend to speed up our speech, then we lose our impact. And I don't mean to keep picking on my friend, but her professor voice was also low volume. So I had to strain to hear her words, and it came across as low authority, low confidence, and without eye contact, it just made it not engaging. So volume gives life. It's not about being loud. Being quiet draws people in, but use it sparingly to emphasize a point. And silence. Silence is powerful, especially when used in place of filler words or ums and ahs that would decrease your credibility and projected confidence. Silence can emphasize an important point by giving your listener a chance to digest what you just said. I need to practice this myself. Silence gives yourself the chance to think before answering a tough question, too. Body language, eye contact, facial expressions, hand vocabulary. It's not just hand talking, but using your hands to help tell a story. If you're telling a story about opening a door, well, demonstrate that you're opening a door. It just adds to the richness of the story you're telling, which brings us over to storytelling. Everyone loves stories. Stories are memorable. Lastly, the technical interview. This could be a take-home test with a set of problems to solve, or it could be live with the interviewer watching using a site like codeinterview.io, where you'd write your code with the interviewer watching in real time. I, I suggest in that instance, before you write your code, put in comments the approach you're going to take. That way, if the code has any syntax errors, your logic is still evident. The interviewer is looking for production-ready code, which means all possible errors are caught, edge cases accounted for, and it's secure. If it requires an API response, are you checking for valid response? I want to end on my last technical interview that landed me at my current company. It was a take-home test to be completed in 2 hours' time to be written in PHP. I was so anxious and nervous during those 2 hours, just spiraling, and I couldn't think. So by the time the 2 hours was up, I had finished half the questions. But I emailed my test back on time with a little apology, owning up to the fact that it sucked. However, I continued to work on the problems, and the next day I emailed my full completed solutions, stating that I couldn't leave the problems unfinished, and hoped that they would consider reviewing my solutions as this demonstrated my abilities better. That impressed them enough to bring me in for an interview, and now, almost 12 years later, I'm still here. So, thank you. Uh, and I guess I'm faster than I thought. So, yay! Here are all my references.
Sorry, I'm talking by myself in the other side. I will put all of this for resources for everybody to look, but I love it. And I feel like, again, these are tips that absolutely anyone can use. I have some questions, and maybe I will start with, I don't know how to. Okay, let's see. Daima, I'm going to say your name not right, but Diama is asking, what was the third communication skill point? Maybe I can go back into the presentation and we can show it.
I could do that. Storytelling. I might have got cut off a little bit here. Right? Can you see it? Yeah, okay. Yeah, storytelling. How to tell a good story. So this goes back to that 4 core stories that you should create and practice. Practice telling it. You know, this is a conversation. Your interview is your opportunity to show that you're a real human and not just somebody who's an applicant, like just somebody on the internet, right? Learn to tell stories.
I love this, mostly because for me, and I'm going to be honest, this is something that we as designers use a lot. Yeah, this is like the core things that we do mostly because our work is all about storytelling and demonstrating a lot about who you are and your brand. And I love that you telling me that as a developer is something that you can utilize is super powerful. And before I go through the questions that we have on the side, I want to ask you something, mostly knowing that a lot of people that come into Cherry and Tech and are participants in our cohort, they're new to tech. And there are a lot of career switchers. So how do you think that they can utilize all these information and still be powerful when they're telling their stories?
Well, for career switchers, for example, one of my mentees, she was on the medical track. She did all of her medical schooling, but then towards the end, she's like, this is not for me. But she has all that knowledge, right? And that is a differentiating skill for her to be in med tech, right? That medical information and new tech knowledge. How do you marry that? Tech these days, it's not just about how you write code. The more knowledge and authority you have on something else, the better you'll be, right? Tech is just a way of solving a problem in another space.
Love it. Okay, I'm going to go through the questions that we have here, and I have more, but we have some questions. So this is for Bandana. Hi, Bandana. Nice to have you here. So, what will be the ideal first section for a resume after the basic details?
That, I think, just a good intro as to who you are, like your elevator pitch, right? Something that's clearly catching that encompasses who your professional identity is. And
And
then all the resume bits is the evidence to that.
yeah, and I feel like that intro section, it will be like a good mix between the job description, who you are, and your pitch deck. So again, you want to always tell people that yes, in a short, like a pitch, elevator pitch in a short sentence or like a paragraph, that you are ready, even if they don't have to read the whole resume. They want to go into it. So that's your catchy phrase to drag them into like, yes, I want to know more about this person. Okay. Uh, I ask a question in the other side, so it will show here. So, how can developers stand out in a crowded job market?
I mean, like I said at the beginning, there's just so many people looking for jobs at the same time right now. Like my husband's company, they put out a senior developer position and they had 1,000 applications. 1,000, right? Like it's just bonkers. So the best thing you can do, well, using it, all the tools, right? Craft your resume and your cover letter so that your keywords will get picked up by whatever ATS system that the hiring company will be using. Do that first. And then humanize yourself, right? That's the differentiator. You want to show your personality in a way that, like, oh, well, this person does have some of the chops and probably easy to work with. I will choose you over anybody else with higher technical skills. I've worked with developers who are insanely gifted in what they do, but they suck at communicating. So they're not the best hires, honestly.
Makes sense. Okay, love it. Question for Yang. So, what are the reasons of not passing the final interview?
Mm. See, I was never on the last end of the interview process, but I think parts of it is your ability and your skills and how able, like how willing are you to learn, how quick you are to learn. I would much rather hire somebody with not enough of the high level skills that I want, but is able to learn, willing to learn, and is humble about it, right? Like somebody who's curious and not just some arrogant bugger who thinks they know everything.
Love it. Okay. And it's so hard to know. At the end of the day, it's not up to you who they choose or not. So, and it's something that I tell everybody that is interviewing, and is landing interviews and they get to the last point and they don't get selected, you are just getting closer to that interview onto landing the job. You just keep practicing and keep getting better. So it's like how you using these last interview, well, all the interviews that you've been going through to improve in your next one. So it's always take it as a win, as like, okay, I'm getting closer, I'm getting better. And maybe that was not the right space for you too. So you never know. Okay, let me choose. Uh-uh. No, this one. Let's show this one. So what are the 3 tips you can give to Deb's job searching who wants to stand up? I feel like we did that a little bit at the beginning, but is there anything else outside of this that people can do? Ooh, can I answer?
Yeah,
Can I answer
absolutely.
this? You can be part of Cherry on Tech. We're starting a new cohort soon. You get to work in cross-functional teams. So you get to work with a PM, with designers, with other developers. You get to work with mentors like Yulenda that will guide you and give you like feedback. So this is something else that you can do. Just throwing it there. But Yulenda, what else would you say?
Well, I'd just like to add on, like Cherry on Tech, for those who are new to tech, is a great opportunity to create those core stories that you need for your resume for your interviewing. If you don't have the experience, do it. Volunteer.
Yes, again, and I feel maybe this is maybe a question for you. Me as a designer or as any designers is a little bit harder for us to show our hard skills. Yes, like you as a developer, do this and boom, you can show it. Us as a designer, it's a little bit harder because we need a whole team to make it possible. And a lot of the questions that we usually get is that who do you collaborate with?
Hmm.
Can you show me a project that you have done with people? So how important is for developers to have that hands-on experience in a cross-functional team?
Very important. Like you need to be able to communicate with your team. The thing is these days with ChatGPT, like you can just ask ChatGPT to write you some code and it'll write you beautiful code. So we have to think about what do we offer as a person and not an AI. We offer our insight and our lived experience to be able to answer problems differently that AI cannot demonstrate it.
Mhm. Love it. Okay, something that I love to and something that I suggest all the time. Again, I'm a designer, so this is for designers, but how much networking can influence or add on into getting a job or stand up in the crowd?
That's a hard one. Definitely, if you have some connections, like I interviewed for a job a while ago, and I I contacted an old coworker who worked there to help like make sure my resume gets bubbled to the top, and that helped because it actually wasn't even in the queue for some reason. So that is great, but beyond that, they can't have a lot of, they don't have a lot of influence to the hiring team. Maybe later on they're like, oh, you know this person? What are they like? All they can give is your character reference. So absolutely reach out to them if you have them, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. They won't have a lot of sway.
Okay. What about what will you say that are red flags from hiring managers? So what to look during the interview, after, yes, or a company, like red flags from hiring managers and companies, so people is aware.
Well, if the interviewee, like the interviewer, is distracted, I mean, that's a bit of a red flag. They're wasting their own time and your time, right? That's a big red flag. But you can actually call them out on that. Like I was trying to say with my friend who did that interview, the 3 people she was interviewing with were all heads down looking on their screens because they were trying to deal with a fire and they didn't have time to really spend on her. So she should have, because she did the research, she knew about it. She should have just called them out and go, oh, I see that you're very busy dealing with blah, blah, blah. I don't want to take up any more of your time. But she could add in what she knows, right? Like use her knowledge what she learned about what they do, what the company does. Do that. Like if you're engaged in the interview, you can show them your skills, right? You just gotta speak up.
Um, yes, I mean, if you know there is a fire, I feel like just say something. That's a big
Right?
deal. It's not
It's
just
a
like,
huge deal. But she
yeah,
didn't think she could, right?
yes,
That's not standard.
makes sense. Yeah, and I feel like with nowadays is really important that any of you that are looking into a job, and I get it. We want a job. Yes, it's like I want to land that first job, and whatever they do and whatever they say is okay, but it's not okay. You don't want to be in a space that you're not respected, you're not that you are not being seen, that no one is listening to you, because that will affect at one point your career, your profession, like your profession, your personal being. So I feel like having these standards when you go to a space is important because you want the best for you.
Yes, absolutely. You have to advocate for yourself and what you need and what you want.
Okay, we have another one from Bandana. So could you share more about those core stories that you mentioned, especially speaking about struggle? It is okay not to have solved them during the project, but share how would you approach them now?
Sorry, let me just read that again.
Yeah, could you share more about those core stories you mentioned, especially speaking about struggles? It is okay if not to have solved them during the project, but share how one will approach them now.
Absolutely. That's a really clever way of explaining what the problem was and say that in the moment you couldn't think of a solution, but now reflecting back, you have learned and this is how you would have approached it. That's brilliant.
I will, I'm going to test you here. Um, could you share like a story and the struggle and how will you, just an example for people so they
One
can
of
see how.
my struggles, well, I mean, like my tech interview, I failed that hard. It was so bad. But like I owned up to it, right? Number one, own up to the mistakes that you've done and rectify it. And then demonstrate that this is how I fixed it. Please give me a chance. Right? It's just you're human. You're gonna make mistakes. How you handle mistakes is what's important.
Yes, and I feel like that's the most important part when you are going into an interview. I feel like be honest and be yourself because that's what you're getting hired for.
Yeah.
Um, and something that I always recommend to a lot of people is like the STAR method. So a star for the situation, S for the situation. So what was going on? See, this is when I start thinking, okay, a star. T, what was the task that you did? The action. So how did you do that task based in the situation? And R, the result. So what did you learn? How did you approach? And using a star for any pretty much any question will help you a lot um, for answering questions and being storytelling, telling your side, how you accomplish. So I feel like that's a good one and easy. Um,
Yeah, that's a great format to create your core stories.
mhm. um, what about, I know that you mentioned some of the questions to ask. What would be, what is the favorite question that someone have asked you during an interview?
It's been so long since I've actually been interviewing someone, so I don't have one that I remember. But any time that it was personally directed at me based on something I already said earlier in that conversation is the most memorable, right? It demonstrates that you were listening and you're paying attention. And now you're throwing it back at me with a little more context and your flair or whatever. Yeah.
What about, I have the interview, I think it was great. What is the next step? What do we do? Do I follow up? Do I share something? What will be the best approach?
Well, one of the questions you can ask is what are the next steps in this interview or in the interview process? So that gives you a little bit about timeline so that you can follow up with an email. So my last interview, in my conversations with one of them, he was talking about looking for a team event to do virtually. And I remembered that there was one and I couldn't tell him on the spot. I forgot. So I emailed him and said, "Oh, this is the thing we talked about. Here is a suggestion," right? Like that's the personal touch. That's what I remembered we talked about. And here is me reminding you. So in that instance, I replied that same day to also thank them for their time. And here is the answer to the thing we talked about.
Perfect. Okay, we have one question for Tanya. What is a good way to self-care for someone in the job hunt? I found that I get really excited about opportunities, but not all of them follow through, leaving me emotionally exhausted sometimes.
Yeah. Um, it's hard not to get excited about something and get your hopes up. I mean, that's just human nature. That's a hard question because every person is different. How do you deal with disappointment? So
I feel,
yeah.
oh no, I was going to say that having a support system and I mean, a tech squad could help you in that. Just keep on sharing and tech stuff here. But I think having a support space that you can come and say, this is what happened, this is how to go, and trying to go back into see see it from the outside and think about it. And again, something that I was mentioning at the beginning is maybe I haven't mentioned this, but this is not up to you. So I feel like when you stand out and think, okay, it's not up to me, I give my best, I practice, I wrote down everything, I went and asked, I network and say thank you. If you have done everything on your side and then you think it's not up to me, then that pressure kind of goes away. But this is a lot of practice. This is not like, oh, yeah, good. You practice this every time that you go to an interview and you just get better. So you see it from the outside. Yeah.
And absolutely. And you're not going to appeal to every single person you meet, right? It could just be something that the interviewer saw and they're like, nothing that you did wrong, just personal preference, and try not to take that to heart.
Yes. Well, this is that, Yulenda. Thank you so much for putting together the presentation and sharing so much. I will add all the resources that you share on the YouTube channel. And again, next week we are going to have another event, this time with the participants from our last cohort. They're going to share their thoughts, their roadblocks, and what happened at the end. But thank you so much. And don't forget to follow us in LinkedIn so you know what is going on. So thank you, Yulenda. This was great.
Thank you, Julius. Thank you for everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.